Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode 91.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
Hi there. My name is Toby Jenkins, and this is the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, this is the show for people who love marketing on the web. We take you behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments, and we look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, in this show, I talk with Billy Murphy, and he has had a fascinating journey, and it's a fantastic discussion. He first started in business buying and selling baseball and basketball cards, and then moved on to 4 years of professional poker online. And it's really interesting to hear how that professional poker element particularly has really influenced his marketing philosophy, and also the importance of the 4-step process that he uses to grow all his businesses and to evaluate his business and marketing decisions. It's really, really interesting. He went on to found Bluewire Poker, which was a membership site, and has also bought and sold about 20 e-commerce sites too and built them up, which is really amazing. He's now in charge of his latest venture, which is Forever Jobless, and we take a deep dive in the interview into Instagram and how he has been able to grow from 0 to 50,000 plus followers and at an incredible trajectory. And he shares 3 key takeaways for really rapidly scaling up your Instagram following, and specifically why there's no time like right now. And it's a really interesting discussion. So it's my longest episode yet, and it is absolutely filled with a ton of lessons. So I really hope you can kick back, relax, and enjoy these gems from Billy Murphy. This show is brought to you by our book, Web Marketing That Works, and specifically the bonus 33 free templates that go with it. You can download them from bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Let's jump in. Hey, Billy, thanks so much for joining me on today's show, mate. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
So, mate, just to get us started, I'm always interested to hear what fires you up each morning.
I guess the biggest thing that fires me up right now is honestly just working on things I'm passionate about, which for me is right now helping entrepreneurs, and also pretty into the fitness stuff. So I try to get in the gym every day and get excited about getting the work in every day for that.
Yeah, awesome. So let's go back to the beginning, really, I guess, in terms of your journey. And I'd love you to share, I have a bit of insight in terms of, the world of where you started with poker and then e-commerce and travel, and, you've got a book going on. There's a whole bunch of things that you've got going on in your life. Do you want to take us back to the beginning and sort of share some of your entrepreneurial journey with us?
Sure. I guess the earliest story for me would be, I kind of became dipped my toes into being an entrepreneur when I was about 17. And I started buying and selling sports card collections, like baseball cards and basketball cards. And, just basically learned that you could make money not working for somebody else. You could work for yourself and make pretty good money and kind of make your own hours. And that really got me interested. And, all my friends were working for, $5-6 an hour or whatever minimum wage was at the time in high school. And I was, buying and selling sports card collections and making, thousands and thousands of dollars in a summer, not working half as much as my friends. And so that kind of got me addicted to being an entrepreneur. Then I got into poker.
Were you doing that online, or was that just sort of trading it amongst your friends?
Yeah, no, that was, so that was when eBay was pretty popular. And basically, I was going to eBay, and it initially started when, I just had my own personal, small collection, and I sold a number of the cards just because I was more of a basketball fan. And so I just sold off a bunch of the cards and, surprised at the amount of money I got. And then literally like a couple weeks later, there was a collection for sale in the paper. But being a basketball fan, I didn't really want the baseball and football stuff. So I contacted the same guy that had bought my personal collection, and he offered to pay me, I think it was 2 to 3 times the amount of the collection just for the baseball and football portion. And so, as a kid, I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. I'm getting at the time I was just hoping for free basketball cards or something out of the deal, and ended up, doubling or tripling my money and getting free basketball cards. And then, so kind of turned into, a business unintentionally, I guess. And then that's kind of, how I got my feet wet as an entrepreneur. So yeah, I would go to eBay after that and I would either find large collections that you could break down, or something I noticed was a lot of people were already trying to do that. And so I would basically build, huge quantities of cards that other people wanted to acquire and break down. And so I was getting, I guess, my supply of cards from a guy in upstate New York who would buy them from sports card, like dealerships or stores. So he would buy, extra inventory from them, and I would buy from him, and he'd obviously make a markup from me. And then I would, market it on eBay. And so ended up, doing, it was still a really, really small business, but for a 17-year-old kid, I did really, really well. Yeah. I mean, that was just usually, during the summers and stuff. And I'd occasionally do it during the year, in between sports and school and stuff like that. But in college, I got into poker and literally started with like $50. My college roommate gave me, I didn't have, a credit card at the time. And so I gave him $50, and he put $50 online for me, and, started playing for, penny games. You buy in for like $5, and you're literally winning or losing pennies each day or each hand or whatever. And it was a learning experience. I can remember being so invested in, if I'd lose like $3 or $4, and I remember I got the account down to like $35, and it was a game, but it was also like, I didn't want to lose $50. Like I didn't have much money at the time.
Yeah.
And so, slowly I got better and better and better, and slowly grew the account to $100, and then $500, $1,000, $10,000. And then, turned out to be really lucrative, I guess, business, if you want to call it a business. And basically did it throughout college. Again, didn't really have to work in college, just mainly did the poker thing. And after college, I got a job for a couple months after college, and then quit the job to become a professional poker player. And then I did poker full time for probably about 3 to 4 years. And that was just playing 100% online or 95% online, where I would just pretty much wake up, walk over to my computer, and whenever I wanted to start playing, just load up a bunch of tables and start playing games. And, it was a really, really good, great way to make a living, especially for somebody who's in their 20s, and allowed me to travel all over the place when I was, 23 years old. My buddies were working nonstop in these entry-level jobs, and none of them liked them and couldn't do anything, 2 weeks vacation at most. And, I was basically just working online in my pajamas and then traveling to different countries when I wanted. So it was, it was a good decision, good life decision. I remember.
Yeah. Did you just stumble into it, or did you think, I just want to, I love poker, I'd love to play around with it? Or did you ever think when you started that it would be a real income earner for you? Or
yeah, I didn't go into it assuming that I would make a living or anything like that. And kind of happened like the sports card thing. Like I had an interest and I thought I could potentially make some money at it, but I didn't enter with $50 saying like, I'm going to turn this into, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was more like, once I understood that you can actually get an edge, and I understood that pretty quickly. I just knew that, with $50, it wasn't, your edge is, when you're learning like that, is not going to be very big. But I knew that if I could, at the time, just make enough money where I didn't have to work and could make a little extra income, I'd be happy. But then, you could just go to the online game and see people and how much money they had at the table. And I can remember going to one of the games and sitting down in one of the games, and then, I was sitting out because I didn't have that much money. And so I remember asking the guy who was sitting there and waiting for a player to play against, and he was sitting with thousands of dollars. And I always saw this player in the games. He played at a much higher level than I did. And I said, hey, is that, do you make money doing this? And I can remember this conversation, and the guy was willing to talk with me. And, he was telling me that he was making, I forget if it was $1,000 a week or a couple thousand a week or whatever. I couldn't believe it. Like, I didn't know if he was, BSing me or if it was real. But, he told me like, look, read some books. I think he gave me some book ideas and some forum ideas. And I did. And I took it to the extreme. I mean, when I get interested in something, I read anything and everything on it, and, ask people who are doing it all sorts of questions. And then, I learned, hey, there's all sorts of guys making money at this. And so once I learned that, then I knew that I would probably try and make a pretty good amount of money from it.
Yep. Yeah. Interesting. Oh, fun. It's nice to following what you're interested in initially and then figuring out how to make money from it, I guess, as well. Hey.
Totally. And I kind of stumbled into the poker stuff from blackjack. I forget how I found blackjack initially, but I remember, I think I emailed a guy with a blackjack blog, and this guy would document how much money he was making at blackjack. And I emailed him and I asked him, I said, hey, look, I'm in college. Would you recommend blackjack for me, or would you recommend, doing something else? Because, at the time I would have to drive to casinos to try and card count, because you couldn't do that online, obviously. And the guy had actually recommended to me, why don't you check out this poker thing? And it was just starting to become popular when I was in college. So I kind of, just one of those things where you just, right place, right time. And, poker was starting to take off. I was a college kid with a bunch of time and nothing else to do but, go to school and learn poker. So, so I did.
It's a good combo. Yeah, cool. And so after poker?
Yeah, after poker, so I did that for about 3 or 4 years. And then I started a couple of poker companies, started a poker training company, did a poker media business, and that's still running today. It's a lot smaller now, but at the time, we were a pretty big poker training company. Started that in 2009. And then
by a poker training company, can you sort of share a bit more about what that is?
Yeah, so it was basically, video capture players playing. So we basically bring on professional poker players and we record their screens as they're playing, and we basically mic them up. And so, if you're trying to learn poker and get better at poker, you can watch our pros play, and basically you'll see, not only what they're doing, you'll see their whole cards as they play, but they'll explain why they're doing everything. And so that way you can get a lot better as a player. So if you're trying to either, start making money as a poker player, or if you're a pro player and you want to become better, then we have, like a dozen guys who make videos doing that.
And I remember you saying, actually, one of the things you realized as well was that online particularly, as opposed to just playing one hand at a time as you can in a casino, then there was the added benefit of actually playing multiple online, meant that you could speed up your learning and condense your learning.
Yeah, totally. It basically skyrockets your ability to learn quickly. It was, to give you an idea of just how extreme it is, if you play live poker in a casino, you're probably seeing about 30 hands an hour. And so if you play online poker, which is, I played no limit hold'em online, usually 6 players max to a table, I would see about 100 hands an hour, which, already is about 3 times as much. But then now keep in mind that also I'm trying to play probably, 8 tables at a time or 10 tables at a time. And so, a live player is seeing probably 30 hands an hour. I'm probably seeing, when I played professionally, probably 800 to 1,000 an hour. So it's really extreme. And so a player that's, played live poker for 20 years, I can catch that player in like a year or 2 years or whatever, however the math works out. But it's extremely quick. Or if somebody's been playing for 20 years, I can literally get the same amount of hands as him in my first year as it took him 2 decades to get.
Wow. It's an incredible learning advantage, isn't it?
Yes, that's why, when a lot of people see all the young players now, making all the money and on TV and all that stuff, and they assume it's luck, but it's not. It's just a matter of that those people were in the right place at the right time with technology, where, all the old timers were in casinos, and all the online players, not only could they play, 20 times faster, but they also had all the tools and all the analytics and all this stuff that the old players are just outdated. And so that's why when people don't understand why the young players are winning all the money, that's why. It's just speed of learning, and also having the analytics to understand why they were basically making the plays they were much quicker.
Yeah. And just as a quick side note, did you ever sort of get interested in the offline then in terms of playing in-person live games?
Not so much. I like to do it occasionally, but it was just so slow. Once you're used to playing 800 hands an hour, when you go to 30, it's like life is moving in slow motion. Like every time somebody would make a decision, I would not understand why they were waiting so long and thinking, because online, you'd make the same decision in 1 second or less. Where in real life, you look at a guy who has sunglasses on and is thinking about it for 2 minutes, and it's really like you're playing t-ball, but you're used to playing major league, So it's a little bit frustrating to play live. And it's obviously you can potentially make more money, but the thing is, because of the fact that you can't play as many tables, you really can't. So even if you could make, a lot more money per table live than you can online, which you probably can, but because of the fact I can't play 8 tables at a time live, then I really can't make as much money.
Yeah, right. Yeah, cool. And do you still play?
Very, very rarely. I mean, if I end up in, California or Vegas or somewhere near a poker room, I might sit down for a game. So not only did I play the 3 or 4 years professionally full time, in college, I'd probably played 3 years where it was, pretty much was my job. So I basically played 7 years with all my free time playing poker. And so after that, it kind of just becomes a job.
Yeah, right. And okay, so let's talk what came next after poker.
So I think it was 2011, I started doing e-commerce stores. And I started with 2 like the same week. I started one store from scratch and then bought one off Flippa. And that kind of, I guess it kind of got me.
What's Flippa?
Oh, Flip was a place where you can buy and sell small websites. So it was, they're kind of the sites that are too small for a broker. And if you're buying or selling a site that's worth like, $5,000, you might find it on Flippa.
Flippa, is it flippa.com?
I think so. Yeah, flippa.com. And so, I just bought a site off there. It was really, really low price and I didn't understand why. So I ended up buying a store for $4,000 and it was making close to $1,000 a month. I thought I was going to get ripped off or something, but did my due diligence, ended up working out, and I ended up basically turning those 1 or 2 stores into probably close to 20 by the end of the first year. And that was basically outsourcing everything, just honestly treating it more like an investment than a business. And basically I would just buy or start really small stores, just dropship stores. So we didn't have to touch the product and just
selling other people's product.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So we were just drop shipping from the manufacturer. So we were basically just in charge of, getting the traffic to the site.
Wow. And so, walk us through that. So why did you get into e-commerce in the first place?
Yeah. I had a friend who was doing pretty well in e-commerce and he told me it'd be a good thing to try out, see if I liked it. And at the time, my other stuff was set up pretty, relatively passively. And so I figured, well, why don't I try this with my spare time? The first one did well. Within, the first couple of months, I'd already made back my money on the first purchase and it was continuing to make, $1,000 or more every month. And so it was at that point where I was like, wow, why don't I go do 100 of these if it's this easy. And obviously if I went back, I wouldn't have gone the quantity route so much, even though I was just investing in it. I would have, focused on just like 1 or 2 and built them up pretty big. But it was just that the returns were so good. Like for example, the other one that I started at the same time was actually a macaroon business. It was French macaroons, just a pastry. And
as an e-commerce store.
Yeah. I just started a random pastry business and it was, because I basically look for opportunities, gaps in market from either, value gaps or marketing gaps. And there wasn't a good offering for that online. And so basically I just found a baker who could make them, made high quality macaroons and asked them if they wanted more sales. And they said yes. And so basically all I was doing was, I guess you could call it white labeling. So, I had my store, I branded my store with our macaroons and basically we were just getting them from somebody else. And so I probably didn't spend more than $500 on that, getting that business off the ground. And ended up selling it for, some months it'd make thousands of dollars, ended up selling that in the package of stores for like $68,000 in 2013. And so it gives you an idea of the returns you could make, assuming you did well. Obviously there's some that I lost, but because of the money I put in was so tiny that, even if the stores that didn't work out, if I'm starting them for $500 or $1,000 or whatever, even if you lose it, but, every once in a while you're hitting I guess what you could call a home run for like a micro business, that your returns are just phenomenal based on your effort and based on your capital you have to invest.
Yeah. So walk us through, let's talk about the macaroons business then as a great little example. But so walk us through, how did you identify the opportunity? And then perhaps your process. I'm familiar with your 4-step process that you talk about in terms of building a business. And I guess this is another business of yours as well, in terms of helping entrepreneurs and online business owners get underway. What was the process behind the macaroons business and how you then went about marketing it from ground zero up?
So when I started, it was mainly through SEO, and I didn't know SEO at all. So I just knew that you could get traffic that way. And so I was, keep in mind, I was a total newbie at not only doing e-commerce, but doing the type of marketing that, you'd get traffic to an e-commerce store for. So I kind of came across the opportunity was, my favorite dessert is actually an almond macaroons. It's kind of random. And so when I was looking for things to sell, I randomly looked up how much traffic, macaroons were getting. And now you're probably familiar with it, but if your listeners aren't, you can look up, they used to call it the Google keyword tool. I think they call it the Google planner now, or keyword planner.
Yeah.
But you can look up and it'll give you rough estimates of, how many people are searching for a certain thing each month. And so basically when I searched for macaroons, it was weird. I was getting in the search results back, or the traffic results, a misspelling of macaroons was getting more traffic than macaroons. And I didn't understand why that was.
Wow.
And so it was strange. And so I found out, I did a little research. I found out that actually a macaron is a French macaroon, which is a totally different macaroon than what I was even looking for. So when I looked at those, I'd never seen one before. And so, I did a little research and found out those were actually more popular than the macaroons that I was used to eating. And not only that, a lot of people didn't even know of them yet. So if you looked at like Google Trends, there were actually more people each month searching than the month before. Where, so this was a business that was, hey, this is pretty good because, people like me don't even know what a French macaroon is. And so that's kind of how I came across that opportunity. But then I saw, just because people are searching for it doesn't mean anything. But I had to figure out, okay, can I offer value in some way that doesn't exist? And what I found was that there was a lot of companies plenty of companies sell macaroons or French macaroons, but a lot of people didn't ship them. Or if they did ship them, they were either slow wait times or really high pricing or just shipped to local areas. And so, the main gap in the market that I found was, hey, why don't I just offer super high quality macaroons delivered fresh to your door in 24 hours anywhere in the country? And so that's what I did. And then basically I literally cold called, I know nothing about the bakery business. So I just cold called French bakeries from around the country and just asked them if they would be interested in basically me selling their macaroons for them online. And, most bakeries don't have, a booming online business. Finally found one willing to give it a shot. And then I discovered why most people don't ship them. They break really easily. They basically send in a way that's not going to break. And so the first couple tries, it didn't work out. They sent samples and they would break. They sent samples and they were too expensive to ship because they put so much around it so it wouldn't break. And finally, ended up coming up with a solution. And then we started marketing it. I didn't know anything about SEO. I went to Odesk, basically hired a bunch of VAs for $3 an hour. And what I would do is they would basically, do a bunch of links. And that was literally all I knew to ask them. Hey, I need a bunch of links because I didn't know SEO.
Yeah.
And so, but what I did was I would have one SEO person cross-check the other person's work. And so basically when they would turn in their own work, I'd be like, great, thanks. Hey, by the way, what do you think of this? These links, are these good? And, I basically had, $3 VAs cross-checking each other's work and slowly learned the SEO game just from, them teaching me SEO when they turned in their work. And so I still knew a relatively low level SEO, but it was enough to be able to hire people and have an idea what I wanted. And so slowly, over the next, couple months, traffic started building up, coming in. And it was, I think, probably the second month or the third month, we started really taking off and getting a decent number of sales. And so then it became a business that, we were doing at least 4 figures a month in revenue, but often at times we would get during Valentine's Day or Christmas, we would have months where we'd do $7,000, $8,000 in sales on this little tiny, French macaroon business that I didn't really know anything about. And I think our margins at the time were really high. It was 45%, which for a product-based business is really, really good. And so, we had months where we were making literally thousands of dollars a month in profit at times. Obviously, in the lower months, we'd make less. Maybe we do $3,000 a month in sales and $1,200 of it is profit or whatever it was. But that was, it kind of got me interested in doing other things. So I started buying other stores, starting other stores, and just ended up with about 20 of them.
And was SEO your sort of main marketing tool then for those stores?
Yeah, so SEO was, I want to say that was probably the exclusive way we got traffic for almost every store. The macaroon store, we did do some paid advertising as well. And the only reason we did that on the macaroon and not the other ones was because the margin was better on the macaroon one because of the fact that we basically created our own product, obviously through someone else. We white labeled it, but the other people are just drop shipping to tons of different people. So the margins are 25%. So you don't have room to have a big marketing budget in there.
Sure. And did it ultimately end up changing your dessert choice, mate? Do you prefer the French macaroons?
Well, it's funny. No, I've still only had a couple French macaroons in my life.
Yep.
And when I was back on the East Coast last week, the place where my favorite place on the East Coast to get my almond macaroons is, 30 minutes from where I was staying. So I drove out there one day and I literally ate a whole box when I was there. So I went off my diet pretty heavy while I was there.
Nice. Got to enjoy the fruits of your labor as well. And mate, so you went from the macaroons as sort of dipping you. Was that what you dipped your toe in the water with, or was that just one of your 20 in the end?
That was one of the 20. That was probably the most successful one, was the macaroon one. The other one was a baby store that we started with. And that was the one that kind of gave us instant results because it was already a store that was operating and making sales. And so, when I bought it, I didn't know if it was just going to plummet and no sales were going to come in. But then, the third or fourth day, a sale came in and another sale and another sale. And so that got me interested in doing a lot more just because it was, I noticed the returns were kind of crazy for where you could buy a store for $4,000 and get a store that was going to make 5 figures that year. It didn't even make sense to me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, so you built out all these e-commerce stores predominantly using SEO. Did you learn a whole lot more about SEO? Were you more sophisticated by store 20 than you were store 1?
Yeah, a little bit, but I didn't do any of it myself. So I outsourced literally everything on the e-commerce store business. The only thing I didn't outsource usually was niche selection, just because, especially the couple that did well, the only reason they did well was just because, picked a market that was missing something. So obviously on the stores I bought, you have a little bit less choice. You're just more buying a cash flow asset. But for example, the macaroon store, a couple others, I would try and find things that people were searching for a lot and maybe didn't have the best selection at the time.
Yeah, cool. And so you hit the 20, and then what sort of made you back away from the e-commerce? So do you still have stores then at the moment?
No, I sold them all off in 2013, or, the ones that were really small, just shut them down because can't really sell a store, just doing a couple of sales here and there. And so the reason was I knew that if I was going to turn that into a big business, I was going to have to basically hire a lot of employees. And I learned that I did not like, going to an office and having a bunch of employees. Like, that's not really my optimal style. And I started feeling like work, even though I was outsourcing everything, like having to, manage what people were doing and things like that. And I knew if it was going to become a big business, I would have to 5 to 10x the employees. And, obviously that's a lot more management. That's not my skill set. And I knew that if I just, let the stores run, which I considered doing, and basically let them run for a couple of years, I decided that if I just let them run and didn't focus on them, they were just going to die off. And so I might as well sell the assets, while they're producing, good income.
And so did you sell them back through Flippo, was it?
Maybe a couple through Flippo, but I think I did 1 or 2 through a broker. 1 or 2 I think I might have sold within my network. A few on Flippo. Yeah, so it was a mix. But a number of them on Flippo, yeah.
Yeah, right. And is it a difficult sort of I've certainly never sold an e-commerce website, but is that a difficult process, or is it relatively straightforward? How do people approach it?
Yeah, it depends on the size. So, like the ones I sold on Flippo were small. So they were, a few $1,000s to maybe $15,000 or $20,000 range. So they were relatively small. The macaroon one, for example, that sold in a package for $68,000. And so that's going to be a little bit more money than the people on Flippo are used to paying. So you might tend to get a bit of a better buyer going through a broker, or even just going through your network in that case. So, for that one, I went through a broker, and it takes a little bit more time. Like, they want to see, all the financials, the website statistics. I think, we even gave the buyer access to our analytics, and so they can see everything that's going on. And they send you a list of 60 questions or 80 questions that you answer, and about the traffic and the sales and the customers and the potential for increase or decrease. And so it's, it's more of there's more vetting, but there's also you get a bit of a better multiple.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, cool. Let's go on to post e-commerce then. Kind of brings us up to current day, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, the last couple of years has basically just been, honestly, a lot of kind of traveling and, I guess, pseudo-retirement type stuff, and forever jobless.
Yeah. And walk us through Forever Jobless.
Yeah, so Forever Jobless is basically a blog, a podcast, and basically just a place where I try and teach entrepreneurs all the lessons that, everything that I've either failed at or succeeded at, and, just try and give people advice on how they can do well in business that, based on my experience. So I include case studies from, case studies from friends' lives, and basically just trying to help people get started. It's more targets the beginning to intermediate entrepreneurs. And I have a lot of different ideas and theories on why most people fail and, why the people that succeed do, and talk about them a lot of times in a mathematical way to help people see that the most optimal way to do business.
Yeah, is math something that you've always, has that just been something you gravitated towards? Because, it sort of makes sense from the poker side of things. It's an extremely analytical and mathematical game, and I would imagine even more so online than, face-to-face. Is that something that you've always gravitated towards, or is that something that you sort of realised you needed to really understand and apply to your businesses?
Yeah, I was always interested, or, at least in school, I was always pretty good at math. Yeah, I think poker really took it to the extreme where I saw if you knew the math behind why you were making decisions, you basically have an edge on everyone else who doesn't. And so, with poker, literally every decision you learn there's a right answer, mathematically, and there's a wrong answer. But the people that don't know that make their decisions in poker emotionally or illogically, where if you know the rough math behind the decisions you're making, I'm going to make those decisions logically and based on the math, so that, over one hand or two hands or 100 hands, a bad player could beat, somebody who makes the right decisions mathematically. But over the long haul, you cannot beat a player that's making decisions better than you mathematically. And in business, it applies the same. So, for example, whether it's investing choices or starting a business, every day we make decisions that, there's an optimal answer and there's a suboptimal route you could go. And the way that most people make decisions in business is actually the suboptimal route. And the reason is most people try and, a lot of times they're not even aware of it, but they subconsciously try and avoid risk. And by avoiding risk, often you're also avoiding the most optimal route, the mathematically correct route to go. So in other words, a decision that would get you a higher return, mathematically, your expected value, your expected profit from a decision, they actually turn down those opportunities on a daily basis just because of the fact that they view them as higher risk. But the problem is that they don't see is, all those little tiny decisions every day of your life add up over, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that, that's why some people become phenomenally wealthy and other people, have trouble putting away 10 grand in the bank. Or if they're an entrepreneur, even successful entrepreneurs that, make 100 grand, maybe they should have banked 5 million over, a couple of decades. But because of the fact that they're making all their decisions not to lose, they're basically, they don't know it, but they're also choosing not to win and not to make the most money they can because the decisions compound, very heavily over time.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. I certainly really recommend, as if you're listening to this, then to jump on Billy's website and read the expected value post. Is that Millionaire Math? Is that the blog post?
Yeah, Millionaire Math. Yeah.
It's an absolute cracker. Mates, just explain Forever Jobless. Why did you start it and what's its main purpose?
Yeah, the main purpose was, when I started out as an entrepreneur, I literally had no idea what to do. Pretty much like we talked about, I would just stumble into things. I would learn, hey, you could make money at this, and I would kind of figure it out. I didn't really have a roadmap of any kind. I kind of created my own as I went based on, failing a lot. And, when I succeeded, realizing that, this is how you're supposed to do it. And I thought that by putting out, information on what works for me, what can work for you, here's how places I've failed, here's how you can avoid that. I didn't have that when I started, and I thought that, it'd be really valuable. I would have killed for that when I was starting. I thought that there's a lot of misinformation online. I felt like a lot of people in the online kind of info marketing space did not have the experience as an entrepreneur. They just wanted to sell ebooks or courses on how to make money, but the people putting the information out didn't actually have that experience themselves. And so I kind of wanted to just put out a site that, helped avoid the pitfalls without the hidden agenda that, hey, we just want to make a bunch of money off the entrepreneurs trying to learn this stuff. And so that's how it kind of came about. Started with a blog, podcast launched, I think it was last year, maybe year or so ago. And then the incubator we launched, I think it was maybe late last year or early this year.
What do you mean by an incubator?
Yeah, the incubator is basically just, we don't even market it on the site. It's basically a place where I take entrepreneurs through the same exact process I go through when I start businesses. So I have a 4-step process I go through for anytime I'm looking at an opportunity. the 4 steps are, step 1 is the value and idea phase. It's basically, do you have an idea that's more valuable than what's on the market in some way, shape, or form? It doesn't have to be like the overall market leader. It has to be better in some way so you can fill that gap. Second phase is marketing. Can you reach your audience? Because even if you have the best product or service in the world, but you can't reach your audience, you really don't have anything. So you got to figure out those first 2 steps before you can move forward. The third step is basically due diligence. And in a sense, it's almost just confirming what you found in steps 1 and 2. And I have a process for doing due diligence to make sure that you actually solve the first 2 steps. Because a lot of people think like, hey, I've got a great idea. I think I can reach my audience, but they really haven't done enough homework yet. A lot of times you get excited about an idea and you're ready, you think you can reach your audience, and you realize, oh, shoot, like, you launch a business and there's more competitors, or there's something that you missed that somebody already fills that gap. And so you gotta take them through a process to make sure they actually can do those things, and give them different ways to look at what competitors are doing, find out how much are your competitors making, how are they getting the traffic they're getting, and basically looking at anything and everything you'd want to know about a market before you enter it. Then the 4th step is, what we touched on for similar to Millionaire's Math is I basically help them calculate the expected value or the expected profit of the idea. And so, if you're going to launch a business venture, most people just blindly go in and don't know what's going to happen. That's the wrong way to do it. And basically doing the first 3 steps pretty thoroughly ensure that you actually know what's going to happen. And once you actually have those variables in place, there's ways where you can actually calculate your expected profit of a business. So the reason that's really important is, let's say you or I wanted to start a business and we had a goal to make, a couple $1,000s a month. Let's say we had a goal to make $5,000 a month, and, we ran the expected value of the business, and, we only thought it was going to make $2,000 a month. Well, it wouldn't be a good idea to launch that business. However, a lot of people incorrectly assume because they have a good idea and they think people will buy it, that they should launch it. Well, all that's going to happen is you're going to spend all your time on an idea that won't actually reach your goals. And that's a problem I see with a lot of people. A lot of people do, the whole minimum viable product thing is really popular these days. But what happens is because people don't actually know what they're getting into, number one, a lot of times they'll launch a minimum viable product in a way that's incorrect. What I mean by that is they'll put a product or service out, and basically, your first test, if you're not an entrepreneur, not an experienced entrepreneur, you won't really know what you're looking for. If people don't buy, you'll say, oh, like that idea didn't work. But if you've actually gone through the 4 steps, a lot of times you'll see, wait a minute, it didn't work. So, we got to figure out why, because we've already gone through the 4 steps. We know this thing's a winner. Let's figure out what went wrong and make it work. Where I see a lot of people that have great ideas that can be marketed and could make a lot of money, and they choose a worse idea because their first little test that they called a minimum viable product didn't work. And so they scrap an amazing idea, and then they'll dump that for a really bad idea that gets a couple sales early on. And because they didn't go through the 4 steps, they'll waste, a year, 2 years, 3 years of their life on a really bad idea just because they got a couple sales.
Interesting. And so this is the process that you use yourself. How do you hold yourself to it?
It's almost like second nature. And I've kind of learned how to do these things based on, honestly, a lot of failing in the past. Anytime I've had a business not go well, you could even look at this and kind of reverse engineer like any projects from your past or friends' projects. If you look at any project, like they have to have passed the first 2 steps to have succeeded. There's no way you can actually have a suboptimal product and do well long term. I might do well short term. And the same way with marketing. If you cannot reach your audience in a big enough way to be able to get the value in front of people, like nobody does well long term with that. There's lots of temporary income earners. For example, there's people that launch, all sorts of products online that are just temporary earners. They'll make a little bit money this year or next year. For example, a great example is in the current market online would be Amazon products. So I see people all the time. What's happening is they'll launch a product, and because Amazon's easy to game right now, a lot of people are making very temporary income, and they don't understand it's temporary because they have no process. So what's happening is a lot of people are launching a product, and it's not a product that would pass phase 1 of the 4-step process. But what's happening is because the marketing side of Amazon is so easy to game, they're getting a suboptimal product in front of a lot of people. So people are buying. But the thing is, as soon as Amazon, which keep in mind, they control your whole marketing channel, the way these people are doing it, as soon as Amazon changes the algorithm, then those people are out of business because they didn't solve step 1. And step 2, they basically only solved in a way that like is temporary. So, most people doing Amazon businesses at this point will be out of business in 2 or 3 years.
Because they haven't spent the time making sure that there's the value and that ultimately their product is better than what's out there. Is that?
Exactly. They're like both on the product side and oftentimes for the marketing side, because the only reason they're solving marketing right now is because Amazon is easy to game and everybody's following the same strategy. But once everybody's doing the same thing, it's very easy it's the same thing as what happened with SEO. There was tons of people making money with SEO, both to just random crappy websites, not selling high quality products, or with just random affiliate sites or whatever they were doing. And as soon as Google changed their algorithms, SEO didn't work as well. And so, people that were making 20 grand a month, 50 grand a month, all of a sudden they were making no money and they were out of business. And so the way that most people do things online, especially in the more kind of, smaller startup scene, and I guess we just see it a lot online, being on, forums and blogs and podcasts and all that stuff, is I see people all the time that are setting up very, very temporary businesses, but they don't even know that they're temporary, and nobody tells them they're temporary because they're learning from people who are also doing only temporary things. And so that's a big problem I see in online businesses nobody's talking about, is most people are setting up temporary income earners at best. And the reason is they have no process.
Interesting. We've touched on marketing there a couple of times, but what's your marketing philosophy then?
The way that I think marketing is easiest, and this almost makes it sound too easy in a way, but this is how it becomes a lot easier, is, when you solve step one in a big enough way, when you have a super valuable idea, it's very easy to scale the marketing. Where, let's look at on the flip side, if you have a crappy idea, it's really, really hard to market that. And the reason is, the best kind of marketing is, when your product is so good that everybody wants to talk about it. And the reason this works well is because of the fact that if you have a great product or service, all you have to do is get in front of your initial audience. And what happens is, if you have such great value that people want to talk about it, they will. And people will do a lot of your marketing for you. For example, Forever Jobless, I don't really market a lot. I do marketing on it to get the exposure that it needs to get in front of the audience. Honestly, a lot of people hear about Forever Jobless from people sharing articles or sharing podcast things. And basically, if I did the same type of blog post that everybody else is doing and the same type of podcast, I would lose all that marketing because I didn't solve step one. And I think that, most people, great example, in the blogging world, in the podcast world, they're taught what content to put out. And what I mean by that is they put it out for all the wrong reasons. They say, write 3 posts a week, 500-word articles, and, throw a bunch of links at them. And then, for podcast episodes, they say, interview someone with this exact format for, 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And what happens is the majority of people are doing the same exact blog post or the same exact podcast episodes. And so the problem is they've actually solved no value. Like, they filled no value gap. The person that told them the structure to do that blog post in that way or that podcast in that way already filled the gap when they initially went into that market, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago. So there is no gap there anymore. So if you're talking about the same subjects, is already you're doing a Me Too business, or in this case, a Me Too, educational, informational, content, then you have no chance of succeeding long term, at least to the level that, any real success. I mean, somebody can make a couple bucks, but it really limits your upside. And number two, it's probably temporary at best, because if you're depending on SEO for your business and not your value at all, it's temporary because you're just depending on Google, hoping Google provides you with an income, not like having a product or a service that gives people value that people will talk about and will spread, and your upside becomes unlimited. I think most people are doing things in a way that, number one, they have no control. Number two, they have extremely limited upside. And number three, it's short term, basically for the combination of those reasons. So anything I've ever done that is done really well has been because I filled the value gap in such a big way that, it's obvious. Like if you, for example, like
by value gap, do you sort of see that is that kind of concept of product market fit?
Well, to give you an example would be like the macaroon one. Like, people were already providing macaroons, right? So it was easy. So I wouldn't have known how to make a better macaroon than anybody else because I'm not in the baking industry. But, what I could do was figure out, where people were not. For example, most of our customers were not in like major cities. They were from people in little towns that didn't have high quality French bakeries. And so I knew that, look, that was a gap in the market. Those people wanted something and they couldn't get it. And so I filled that gap. Like I provided that for them. The way most people do it would be like to give an example, like kind of a exaggerated example would be somebody else would launch a business like this. They would be like, oh, macaroons, people want those. And they'd open up a bakery right next to a bakery trying to sell the same exact thing. And it doesn't make any sense. Like they're not actually doing anything different than already exists. So what's going to happen is the best they'll do is like a little bit of temporary income. Unless you come out and do something better than somebody else, like you're so limited in what your income is, what your potential upside is. And also like it's probably going to be very, very, very short term.
Interesting. And so in terms of that first step, that value idea and how do you be better? And I think actually one of the quotes I've seen, or something that I've seen you write about as well, has been the concept that you don't have to be perfect, but you just have to be better than the next guy, right? Or in terms of filling that gap.
Totally. A lot of people think, when I say, you have to be better than anybody else in the market for what you're doing, it doesn't mean like number one in the market overall. Like for example, if you're going to build a search engine, like you're not going to beat Google. However, like for an example of a search engine like DuckDuckGo, like they filled a small gap in the market. Are you familiar with DuckDuckGo?
No, I'm not actually.
So it's a much smaller search engine. I think the gap they provided it's a lot more privacy with searches. I think Google had trouble with, I don't know the best explanation of it, but tapping into, what people were doing or their search patterns, and people don't like that. And so DuckDuckGo offers privacy when searching. And the way they were showing the results were quite different. They were trying to make higher quality search results for people and giving them, I haven't used it. And so I forget the exact way they were doing it, but they were offering search results in a different way. And so the people that liked that way would go with them. And obviously, so they're not going to overtake Google. However, the small gap, like let's say, for example, just the people that want search results but don't want anybody having anything to do invading their privacy, those people might use DuckDuckGo. And to give you an example of how successful you can be, even though you're going up against a monster, is I think they've done like billions of search results for people. And so, it proves you can still create a really, really, really successful company, not trying to take on the biggest competitor, but just filling a little gap that they don't fill, which the bigger the market you go into, even if you fill a really small gap, it can still be a pretty big company.
Yeah, that's true. It's a known need and you're taking a different tweak on it, hey? So, Billy, in terms of some of the marketing stuff that you're doing at the moment, I mean, one thing that I know, we were talking about earlier was just your Instagram account. You've gone to 50,000 followers very, very quickly. So well done there. Can you talk me through, why Instagram? How's it worked? What's been your strategy? What's worked? What hasn't?
A couple of things. One, it's, the same type of stuff that we're talking about, it relates to this as well to some degree. So for example, even though Instagram, would be considered a marketing channel for me for Forever Jobless, I still look at the 4 steps even on a marketing channel. So for example, when I look at my post compared to what other people are posting in the space, I looked at, how can I provide value in a better way than what other entrepreneurial pages on Instagram are doing. So, if you see what I'm doing on Instagram and a lot of my posts, Instagram is very image heavy. And so, you post your picture, and most people, all they do is post a little picture and post a picture, and then they'll, maybe they'll write a little, sentence under it or something like that. But, the majority of my images, it's almost like a mini blog post under it and I noticed that, my goal was just to give more value than anybody else was giving. And, so for me, it's not going to be on the images. I'm not taking high quality photos. I'm not doing, insane designs where people are just going to love my images that much more. But, the biggest value that I can give is, why don't I just explain, what this quote means to me, or, how people should incorporate, whatever it is the image suggested in their own life. And so, sometimes I'm writing 400 words or 500 words or whatever the max is on Instagram on trying to help people understand certain concepts. And so, what I've learned is there's very, very few people doing that on Instagram. And the reasons for that are similar to the blog space. It was, a lot of the people who have Instagram pages in the entrepreneur space, either one, they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to give value because they're more focused on just posting an image. They've never run a business or they haven't done business, so they wouldn't be able to add value in that way. Or two, they haven't solved the marketing step. They don't know how to grow their page. So even if they could do that, they wouldn't reach the people. And so again, it's just combining step one and step two, the value and the marketing, to know that if I can provide more value, if I can figure out how to reach the market, then I know my page will grow very fast. And I knew that because of due diligence, looking at, how are other pages growing? Why were they growing? What were they doing to grow? And, basically figured out like the gap that I could fill was just providing more value in terms of, for me, it was just writing instead of the actual pictures. And so I knew it would grow pretty fast. And so it's gone from, I started back in, it might have been April or March when I was traveling around Australia. I just decided to hop on, and I had a blog reader, guy who read my blog for a while, he actually wrote me last year and said, hey, I think you do pretty well on Instagram. And, I never, I get a lot of emails and I tend to get unorganized and forgot to follow up with them. And then it was like 6 months later, I followed up with them, had some time in Australia. And so I was like, I want to try this out. And, just kind of messed with it as I was traveling around Australia. And so, grew a little bit while I was there. And then, lately I've really figured out, a lot of strategies that work really well. And a lot of people aren't doing all the different things that I'm doing. And so I've gone from, I think 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was at like 20,000, and now I'm at, I think, close to 56,000. Part of that is because it's starting to compound, like people are starting to talk about it, but also it's just because it's just I'm leveraging, everything I'm doing that worked, I'm doing more of, and the things that weren't working, I'm doing less of.
So can you share a couple of tips perhaps on the Instagram front, if you're happy to, you've seen that have really worked for you?
Yeah. So, honestly, what I think is the biggest thing has been providing those long captions. I think if I was doing...
I actually didn't even realize there was a max on Instagram. I'd be surprised if many people knew there was a max on Instagram.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I didn't know either until Instagram kept telling me my captions were too long. I was writing so much stuff.
Yep.
So I figured it out. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I started writing such long things that I kept getting shut down on my captions. So I had to shorten them up. But I think that's, at least for me, that's what's worked well. I knew if I came out with a page that had the same type of pics as everybody else and everything else, it would have been hard for me to scale, because I would have been marketing the same pages that already existed. So that mattered a lot. And I know we went over that, but unless my value is there, my marketing really won't work as well. So that was my value gap. And the marketing side of it, a couple of things I'm doing differently is a lot of things. To touch on a couple, like one of the ways people grow on Instagram fast, and I actually didn't do much of this at all when I started, and I'm starting to do more of it now. It's called, doing shout outs for people. And, they call them shout for shouts, or you see SFS for short. It's basically when, a certain page will shout me out and say, hey, you should check out Forever Jobless on their page. And, I could say, hey, you should check out this other guy on their page. So you can either do shout for shout, where I guess you could call it cross promoting each other with other pages around your size. You could purchase, promotions on other people's pages. I've done most of my stuff organically. I've done some advertisements, but a lot of guys are just doing it by, shout for shouts, basically just promoting other pages. And the one problem with that, and why I do that somewhat limited, is because I don't, if you look at Forever Jobless, you'll see I don't really promote anybody. And the reason is I don't feel comfortable promoting to pages where I don't know who's running that page. Yeah. And I don't know the information they're putting out. I don't know what link they're going to send people to. And so I don't want to say, hey, you guys should totally go, check out this random page. And then they try and sell them things that is not going to help them. So that matters. So from my Forever Jobless page, I don't promote very much. But then, for me, I actually bought, other pages. And so I own other pages where I can do my shouts for people. And then I just have them promote Forever Jobless back. And then, I'll do other things like, everything from, most people don't use hashtags correctly. So for example, when you make a post, you'll see on my posts, I put, 30 hashtags on the first comment. So a lot of people either put it in their comment and then it looks kind of spammy, or they just won't use hashtags. The thing is, hashtags help you reach, a number of people. And, now it matters less because I'm now at, 50, 55, 56,000 people. When I was starting, when you have one follower, if you, put a bunch of hashtags in, you might reach 10 people, 20 people that never would have seen your stuff if you didn't use hashtags. So when you're starting out, the maximum they allow you to do is 30 hashtags. And so everybody should be maxing them out when you're starting. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't want it to look bad or whatever. But the thing is, like, yeah, it might look a little weird in the beginning because nobody's commenting on your stuff. But if you start reaching enough people and you get a couple comments, like, nobody will ever see your hashtags anyways. Like,
that's true.
If you've seen my stuff, you might not have even ever seen a hashtag on my thing. That's the reason being there's so many comments on my post now is they bury it by like the third post.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Instagram automatically sort of condenses those top couple of comments anyway. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And so how have you found Instagram in terms of driving web traffic and, email conversion? Because I've noticed obviously that you put links in your bio, there's restrictions around that with Instagram as well. Yeah. How's that worked out for you?
Yeah, Instagram only allows you one link, and so basically you've got to, every single post I make, I can't link in my post. I think they'll probably do something with that at some point, but Instagram is still relatively new. Like, a lot of people don't use it. I literally never used Instagram until a few months ago, and so I feel like they'll change some things like that where they may give you more opportunities. But right now, in your bio link is the only place they'll let you link from. So in your profile. And so, so for me, I just send people to Forever Jobless. I'll just send people to the homepage. And the goal being that, the more people who are following my page and seeing my post and reading my captions, they'll want to see more content from me. So they'll be likely to, visit the site and hopefully subscribe to the blog. And it's definitely helped. Like, I've, right now, Instagram is my number one source of traffic.
Wow.
My number one source of email subscribers.
Wow.
And it would be, because I don't sell much on Forever Jobless, and it's also made X amount of money. But like, once I sell, because the incubator, I don't promote publicly, like on the blog. I just promoted it a couple of times through email. But for example, like when I sell this book that I'm releasing in the next couple of months, like, I'm sure that it'll be a big driver of sales for the book. And, if I launch, I'm actually considering doing Instagram course for people and helping them learn how to do this. And so, assuming I launched a course on that, I would bet that Instagram would be one of my top sources of sales for that.
Yeah, I would imagine too, for sure. Oh, man, that's really interesting because, I mean, not that I'm a huge Instagram, I love it. It's actually probably my preferred social media platform, really, because it's kind of what Facebook used to be.
And you hit the nail on the head, really, is it is what Facebook used to be. And that's why there's an opportunity right now. To give you an example, what I mean by that is, when I put out a post on Instagram right now, I'll probably get, right now around like 1,500 likes on a post, on just one post. And when I put out the same exact, type of post on Facebook, on my fan page, I think I probably have like 4,000 or 5,000 people that, liked my page on there. I might only get 1 or 2 likes. And so there's literally like a 500 to 1,000 times engagement. And obviously, my page might be 10 times bigger, but I'm getting 1,000 times the engagement or hundreds of times the engagement. So it gives you an idea. And here's the reason behind that. The reason is because, a couple big reasons. One is, because Instagram doesn't offer an ad platform, people see more of your content. Because, Facebook's goal, and Facebook owns Instagram, so it's going to go that direction. Facebook's goal is to make money. So they don't care how many people see your post. But if you pay them for advertising, they want people to see that post because they make more money for ads. So the thing is, Instagram right now doesn't have an ad platform. That creates an opportunity for people who want to capitalize on no ad platform. So it's funny because, same way as anything else, there's 2 ways to look at things. A lot of people look at Instagram and say, "Oh, like that's I want to make I want to advertise on Instagram. I wish Instagram had an ad platform." I look at those opportunities, and those people are saying, "Oh, that sucks. They don't have an ad platform." I look at opportunities like that and I say, "Wow, that's great," because of the fact that I'll basically capitalize on an opportunity because of the fact that there's less people trying to advertise on Instagram or trying to basically create good content on Instagram. I'll have less competitors, therefore I'll make higher returns on my time, and my money.
And so your organic, your organic as opposed to the paid reach is obviously going to be much higher because you're not competing with the platform itself for eyeballs, are you?
Well, yeah, because there's no ads going up right now. So basically, like in theory, I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but in theory, I would guess that my post, when I put out a post right now, reach close to 100% of my audience. And so, in other words, on Facebook, when I put out a post, I think it probably reaches like 1% or 3% of my audience. Yeah. So, there's a limited window where you can capitalize on this where most people aren't. And it's funny, people just sit on the sidelines and wait for the ad platform. Well, in the meantime, I'm building up a huge following on there because I have no competition. The other side of that is that there's really not, most of the bigger players are sitting it out because they just want to, buy the ads and spend money on the ad platform. But, the real opportunity is, why don't you capitalize when there's no competition? And I think that's what, a lot of people are missing the boat on that, this is when you do the best on it. And when ads come out, yeah, it'll be easier to do. But when things are easy to do, it becomes more economically efficient. And when things are more economically efficient, all that means is basically you make less return.
Yeah. Interesting. And I mean, also, forever jobless for that business as well. Instagram is that's where your audience is, right? As well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that are interested in making money on Instagram. It is a younger crowd, and so I've noticed that there's a lot of very beginner questions. A lot of people either in high school or college, and so for example, my incubator course is over $1,000. So I think it's a harder market if you wanted to sell higher end products like that. I think it's probably a great market for things like books or ebooks or podcasts or apps. Actually, the guy who helped me get on Instagram and learn Instagram, he is a young kid. He's, I think in his 20s, maybe 20, 22, 24, something like that. And so he started an app, and his whole business is, he has the app obviously on the iTunes store, and he has, I think, close to 100% of his traffic coming from his Instagram page. And I think he's making like maybe $5,000 a month or more. And, this is his first business, and basically his marketing is Instagram.
Wow. Phenomenal, hey? Just do one thing and do it really well.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, the time to do it is now, because if you think about it, when people start getting less engagement, number one, it's going to be much harder to scale a page. And so the people that scale them now basically are going to already have the platform built. Yeah. And so, like, for example, if I try to do now what I'm doing, I'm going to be over 100,000 within probably the next couple of weeks. But if I looked at it and I didn't start until they had an ad platform, it might take me a year, 2 years to build that many people, where now it's going to take me just, maybe a few months.
Yeah. No. Oh, that's a really cool insight. Thanks, Billy. And mate, you just mentioned actually you've got your book coming out. Walk us through that story, because that's a great story too.
Yeah, so it's kind of really random how it happened. So I won't mention the name of the book because I think we're probably going to use the same title. But so I read a book probably over a decade ago, or around a decade ago. And this is when I was kind of just getting my toes wet in business, and I was trying to learn how to make money, how to do better at business. And I read a book that really resonated with me. I thought it was really, really high quality, not a lot of fluff. It was just to the point and told me what I needed to know. It really helped me a lot. And so basically when I had contacted him maybe 5 years ago and talked to him for a little bit, and I already thought about doing this with him, but when I was in Australia earlier this year, he lived over there. And so I sent him a message and said, hey, I'm over in, going to be over in Australia, want to meet up. And, luckily I was traveling around to a couple different cities. And so he was in one of the cities that I was in. And so we grabbed coffee, and, I initially approached him about just buying the rights to his book, because he didn't really do much with it anymore. It's not a really well-known book. And it's, he wrote it a long time ago and didn't really take off. But it was the quality is there. Like it passes, phase one, the values, really heavy. And so, but it just didn't, they didn't do the marketing step because, he wasn't a book guy. He was a real entrepreneur. Like he didn't really, so he did the deal through publishing companies and so the marketing was on them. He just kind of, did it, to do a book and, offer value to people, but the publishing company didn't get it out the way they should have. And so I initially approached them and said, let me buy the rights and I'll help put this book on the map for you. And I just, for me, it was kind of partly just a passion project because look, like this book helped me out, when I started. So I told them I would just like to help, get this type of thing in the hands of people that it could help out as well. And I thought also that I could kind of add pieces to the book from my own story and, kind of update the book. And, it was written close to 2 decades ago, I think. And so it was, had a lot of updating to be done. And so, wanted to buy it off of them. But then we ended up, sitting down and talking and we just ended up doing so he's going to basically stay on as, we're both going to be authors on the book. It's just that I'll basically take it over in terms of updating the book and adding content to the book and then do the launch and do the marketing for it and basically use my, the platform on Forever Jobless to help promote it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Such a fascinating way. I mean, obviously Ads and I wrote our book a little while back or just over a year ago now, actually. And so, it's a pretty brutal process. So I think I think you've made a smart play having something to work with initially, mate. I think that's a great way to, as you say, share something that's really had an impact on you as well and expand on it and make it more relevant and what have you. That's a fantastic approach.
Yeah, the way I looked at it was I've wanted to write a book for a while and I realized that if I write my own book, it's not going to be out until like late next year or something. And so I figured, well, why don't we take a book that's already really good and, spend a couple of months on it and get it out a lot faster.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Mate, you'll have to let me know when you're ready to hit the launch button on that. We'll do what we can to support you on that too.
Awesome.
Yeah, so mate, who do you learn from?
Who do I learn from? That's a good question. At this point, I think, I've built up a pretty good network. So I have a lot of smart friends in business. So, there's a lot of things that I'm either not good at or want to get better at that I usually have people now in my network that I can ping and say, hey, you're good at this. Can you help me out or put me in touch with somebody? It's just, it depends on the subject. For example, book marketing, that's just a different segment of, my friends that, are really good with books that, I could ping for advice and just say, hey, I'm putting a book out. What do you recommend? And so I guess it was a lot tougher when I started to be able to do that. And it helps really to build a network so that, now it's a little bit, whatever I jump into, I kind of, either know somebody who knows the subject or knows somebody else who knows the subject that I can kind of ping. So I guess it varies based on what subject I'm in. I didn't really have a mentor per se. Like, I considered most of my mentors from, books that I read, authors, like the same way as my co-author on the book was one of, somebody I considered a mentor because I read his book and it helped me learn a lot of things and kind of put me on a path to going in those type of directions. Read books like Rich Dad Poor Dad when I started out. And so, those things got me thinking in a certain way. But honestly, a lot of who I learned from is just, mainly people in my network. It's not, there's not any sort of mentor or courses or anything like that really that I take. It's been more,
just go to the specific, like you've got a specific problem, you go to the specific person to try to get that resolved. Is that the approach?
Pretty much. Like if I have a copy question, I got my buddy Neville, who's a good copy guy. If I have a book marketing question, I got my friend Tucker. If I just a different person for any type of problem or question. Yeah.
And I mean, one thing you do a lot of is reading, isn't it?
Yeah, I read a lot. I haven't read as much lately. I tend to go in spurts. I guess I'm very unbalanced. And most of my life it is, I'm either. What's that? Oh, no,
I just saw on one of your, I think it was on one of your Instagram posts actually that you said, I prefer imbalance.
Yeah.
Where you go all in on one thing, to use a poker analogy.
Yeah, totally. And I've been like that my whole life for a long time though is, whenever I want to learn a lot, I don't do any work and I'll literally just read. I guess you could consider it work because I'm doing, technically research or due diligence. But, I've had months where I'll read like 8 books, which for me, I guess is a lot because it's, I'm a slow reader. I tend to take a lot of notes and really digest it. Like I don't speed read through, but then, I'll go months and months where I don't read anything. If I'm either in a project, like right now, I'm trying to write a book and trying to, potentially do an Instagram course and, keeping up with the Forever Jobless Incubator. And so it's, and doing Instagram posts. And so there's just a lot happening on top of traveling and other things. So it's, now I'm reading almost nothing just because I'm so busy. But then, in a couple months, maybe I won't be doing any work and things will be passive. And then I'll be, devouring like a dozen books in a month. So yeah, I do quite a bit of reading. I probably have hundreds and hundreds of books here at my place. And I actually don't use Kindle. I know most people use Kindle. So when I travel and go on long trips, I'll literally pack a bag of pretty much like full of books or like half full of books.
Really?
Yeah. And so it's one of my weird things. And it's funny when I
used to do that as well. But then Kindle has certainly moved me away from that.
I'm old school. I'm very old fashioned. Like I'm not, for an internet entrepreneur, I don't use a lot of technology that we have. I remember moving out of one of my apartments one time in Austin, and I was out of town. I was on the East Coast, but staying with my family and just pretty much hanging out there for the summer. And I remember I pretty much sold off everything, and I think put some stuff in storage. But like I take a lot of notes in my books, and so I didn't want to risk like my books getting taken or like not being able to find my books. And so I actually gave like the few boxes of books that I had to a friend to store at their place in a safe place. So like, so that I didn't care if anything else got stolen, but if they stole my books with like all my notes in them, then like I didn't want to lose that.
Yeah. And so do you have like a note-taking technique? Like do you keep a notebook specifically for the books that you're reading, or aside from sort of scribbling and stuff in the books themselves?
Yeah, so it varies. A lot of times I'll just scribble notes to go back to. So, for example, if I have a 200-page book, and I'll tend to just jot notes or just kind of highlight different sections. Then I can go through like a 200-page book in like 10 minutes and kind of get the points that I wanted from it. But lately, what I've done a lot of is if I find a book I really like, what I'll do is I'll go through. If I have a ton of notes in the book, I'll go through and it's almost like I'll rewrite the book, but only with the important stuff, like only from the stuff I wanted to take out of it. Mm-hmm. And so, but I can turn a 200-page book into like, 10 pages or 15 pages of like the stuff I know, like I have to get better at, or that I want to reference or remember.
Yep.
And so I'll just kind of like rewrite like, the book in kind of like just my form, I guess. So
it must be a powerful way of digesting content.
It helps so much. Like it just really, really reinforces everything. And by the time you basically rewrite it, you've kind of reread a bunch of the stuff as you're rewriting. And so it's almost technically like you've read the things that you wanted to learn like 10 times because you're referencing writing. And I find that's a lot more impactful. It takes a long time. Like it takes hours a lot of times, but it's by the end of it, you know that subject almost as good as anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. And mate, has there been a book of the hundreds that you have? Is there one or two that really stand out as having had a sort of disproportionate impact?
Yeah, I would say one book that stood out a lot. It's a beast of a book. It's like 400 to 500 pages. Was the Success Principles, Jack Canfield. It's really good book. And I actually started getting into heavier goal setting once I read that. And I actually, that's some of the posts we were talking about before the call, got me into documenting those posts. It's almost like it started out almost as like some sort of a compilation of the most important things I learned from that book and how I'm incorporating it into my life. But that's a really good book, The Success Principles. And then last year, I would say my 2 favorite books have been Essentialism and The One Thing. And those go together pretty well. It's basically kind of a similar concept that, most people should be focusing on, one thing, and that's it. And, the essentialism concept is that, you should get rid of everything else. And the point that really stuck out to me in that book was that literally anything in your life, I think they were talking more specifically for business, but like I try to do it in my life, is anything that's not a 9 or a 10 for you should be a 0, because basically it's just taking up time from other things. It could be a 9 or a 10. And so, or from spending the time on that thing that is a 9 or a 10 for you that you get really, really good at or just enjoy a lot more. And so that really helped. And it's something, that's a book that I really need to go back and read the whole thing again, just because it was that good. And it really, I know I'm really bad. I have the shiny object syndrome, like a lot of entrepreneurs. And I want to do 74 different things today. And so it's very, it's something I need to improve at. And so I found that book too, for a lot of friends, has been the number one book for them. I know, Noah Kagan recommended that book to me, and he has those principles in at AppSumo and SumoMe, and those guys focus on one thing and they crush it because they're focused on one thing. And most entrepreneurs, myself included, lots of times they dabble and they do 4 or 5 different things. And when you're doing so many different things, you can't really become insanely good at any one of them. You can become kind of good because basically you're splitting up your energies between a lot of different projects.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that idea. I read Leo Babuta's The Power of Less. It's another cracker, and I've got his book has just arrived as well, The Zen Habits. So I'm looking forward to that. But Essentialism, definitely, Adam's read it and loved it too. So I'm overdue to jump into that one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And mate, just a handful more questions. Really appreciate your time. Thanks, Billy. But do you have a favorite quote or piece of advice that you use for inspiration?
Yes, best quote, and I've used this so long. I don't know if it was me that made it up or if it was something I read such a long time ago that but I have no idea who it was.
Lost in the mist of time.
Yeah, it's the quote is, "Listen to those you aspire to be like, and ignore everyone else." And the reason that's important, when I started as an entrepreneur, like I mentioned, I had no idea where to go for information, and I got a lot of really bad advice. Now looking back, I can look back in hindsight and say, man, if I had just had that person been where I wanted to be, I could answer whether I should be listening to them or not. So, for example, when I started, I was on the Rich Dad, Poor Dad forums, and there was people all the time giving advice. But the problem was they were all giving advice with the intention to sell you into their MLM. And so, I had all these guys
marketing.
I had all these guys willing to hop on the phone with me, and obviously I was a young kid. I had no idea. I was really green, and I would hop on the phone with these guys and be like, "Oh man, I can't believe this successful entrepreneur," because that's how they portrayed themselves on the forums. Where couldn't believe this successful entrepreneur was taking 2 hours out of his day to talk to me. Well, that's crazy. And then I would be I'd start thinking about it and be like, well, that's weird. What is, why, how does he benefit from that? Why is he doing that? He doesn't know me, so he's not just trying to help me out. And so, I know he's trying to get me to sign up for this business and he makes a commission, but well, wait a minute, that's where he's making all his money, and they've never actually made money. Why am I taking advice from him? And finally I figured it out that all these guys that were spending a lot of time giving me advice, the only reason they were trying to do that was to get me to sign up for their program. And that the only reason they had 2 hours free was because they weren't making much money. Their time wasn't very valuable because they weren't very successful. And so, now I look at, doesn't matter what I'm doing. I did the same thing with, with fitness, with business. I look for people who've already had the specific result I'm looking for. And so I know I'm not going to waste my time if I basically try and, read books from them, read articles from them, meet them in person, hire them for coaching. I see a lot of people getting advice from the wrong people because I just haven't looked at, has that person been where you want to go? When I did I got into bodybuilding stuff a little bit in the last year or two, and basically I had no idea what to look for. I was a total newbie, and I contacted all sorts of trainers, and every trainer told me I can help you with those goals. And I had really specific goals, really aggressive goals. And when I looked at wait a minute, let's just see if this person's been where I want to go. And most of those people could not answer those questions or had not been where I wanted to go. And so I just found a person who just had the exact results that I wanted. He had actually way more extreme results than I wanted. And so I knew that person knew exactly how to get me where I wanted to go. And so it's literally the easiest way to get to where you want to go is just find somebody else who's already been there and they can just give you their blueprint.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant advice. And particularly in a world where, increasingly there's more and more advice, right? Access to information is, we're all drowning in a fire hose, really. And that's a great filter to use and qualify the information that you're drawing on and you're trying to learn from.
Yeah, because it's a good thing that there's so much information available. When I was starting, there wasn't hundreds and hundreds and hundreds or thousands of of entrepreneurial stuff on YouTube that you could look at for free. And so it might have taken you or me like 5 years or 10 years to find that kind of information that we can get in a day right now. But the one problem with that is like, if you get the wrong advice, you could be going down the wrong hole for a long time. And so if you just ask the question, is this person giving me this advice? Have they been where I want to go? And if not, then you should consider looking at someone who has been there, because they actually know how to get there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Billy, thanks so much, mate. How can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, they can visit me at foreverjobless.com. They can find me on obviously Instagram at foreverjobless. Incubator, I think, is foreverjobless.com/incubator. The podcast is on iTunes, the Forever Jobless podcast. And hopefully find me on Amazon soon if I can ever get this book done.
We'll let people know about that as well for sure, mate. But look, thanks so much, Billy. Really appreciate it. And there's a ton of lessons there for us all. So appreciate your time. Thank you, mate.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Cheers. This show is brought to you by our 33 free marketing templates. You can download them at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Now, we would love your feedback, we would love your questions, and also any guest suggestions. You can contact me on email. I am toby.jenkins@bluewiremedia.com.au, or on Twitter, I am at Toby_Jenkins. Also, if you enjoyed the show, we would love it if you could leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks so much, and see you next time.